I'm Erica Lynn, and we all know the ocean is the most demanding environment on Earth, consistently testing the reliability and durability of our equipment. When you spend as much time fishing as I do, you know that reliable gear is essential for staying on the water. This is why I went with the Abyss battery to power my trolling motor, electronics, and outboard. The guys at Abyss Battery are rattling the saltwater industry by manufacturing performance marine batteries specifically designed for sonar, outboards, trolling motors, and electronic fishing reels. They're also Bluetooth compatible, so I found checking battery statuses right on your phone while you're out on the water is a huge game changer. To learn more about why Abyss batteries are used by the pros and factory installed by premier boat builders, visit abyssbattery.com.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by overpriced wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I heard that for a limited time, all Mint Mobile wireless plans are $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they sell wireless service online. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. To get this new customer offer, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Hello and welcome to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Oswald, and I hope you join me on my quest for knowledge to become a better public land hunter, angler, and forager. Stick with this and who knows, maybe we will learn something together.
All right, so I'm sitting here and I am talking to Douglas Boze. And Douglas, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Luke. Thanks for having me. My name is Douglas Boze. I'm the author of The Ultimate Guide to Black Bear Hunting and No Bait, Just Bears, the creator of the Ultimate Predator Calls app for Android and iOS. Just kind of an average family guy based in Washington who enjoys hunting bears and has the honor of being on this podcast today.
Awesome. So I got to ask you, like, how did the whole bear hunting book start? Where did the journey begin, and how did it take you to that point?
Well, so it started kind of by happenstance. Like a lot of people, I buy a bear tag every year when I go deer hunting, with the hope of maybe seeing a bear and shooting one incidentally. And that's kind of what happened in my late 20s. I happened to see a bear across the gully. She was actually sitting on her butt, picking maggots off of a dead deer off of a cougar kill. But I didn't know she was doing that at the time. I could just see she was sitting down and eating stuff off of her paw. And so I raised up and I shot and dropped her in her tracks. And I went over there and she was a smaller bear. She was kind of an average bear, about 150, 180 pounds. But the term ground shrinkage, when I first saw her, I thought, oh, she's a bigger bear. And I get over there and she obviously wasn't. So that term ground shrinkage was something I learned quick. But from that kind of kindled my love of bears. Like that was the first one I had seen in the wild, and I had seen it and shot it, and I was deer hunting at the time, so I really had no clue on how to kind of target bears. And so as the next season progressed, I wanted to learn more and more about bears, and so I started kind of researching them online, reading books, and just trying to absorb everything I could about it, watching Jim Shockey videos and trying to figure out how to judge them and this and that. And then, I started to learn kind of what to look for. And through a couple of seasons, I became more and more aware of bearish type areas that look like they hold bear, and the sign to look for, and the different things they do that leave clues around that aren't so obvious. And I really kind of get into it. But really got into it, predator calling too. Like when I first got into predator calling, calling in bear was just like instantly hooked. The very first time I predator called, I called in a bobcat and a coyote on the same set. And I thought, how fantastic of a tactic this is. I instantly loved it. Then when I realized I could call bear in, I was more hooked. And from that, where I hunt, where I live in the state of Washington, you can't hunt bears with bait or dogs. So it's all spot and stock. And I noticed online there was a lot of people who had questions about, hey, I don't know how to find bear, this or that, and not just in Washington, but in general. And I thought, well, shoot, I'm just gonna make kind of a brief self-published book on my knowledge of bears and put that out there and see if people like it. So that's where No Bait, Just Bears came. I self-published that on a company called Lulu Publishing, and it's only, I don't even think it's 100 pages, but it's just more of a lengthy report basically. And so I took that and I passed that around to some publishers. I shipped it out to various publishers, and one publisher got back to me in New York, Skyhorse Publishing, and they said, hey, we can't print this, but would you rewrite it, add a bunch of stuff to it, and then we'll send it out. So of course I was like, yeah, that's great. So that's where the Ultimate Guide to Black Bear Hunting came in. I added a section on baiting and added a bunch more stuff to it, some recipes and more stories, and then they published it and put it out, and that was in 2016 September when that came out, and so here we are.
So I gotta ask you, did you hunt when you were in your youth, or was it something that started later in life? And then when was your first actual bear hunt?
I started hunting when I was 12. Big game. That's when I went through hunter's ed and stuff like that. I had done like little hunts for rabbits and stuff when I was really young, but big game hunting I started at 12, and I mainly just hunted deer, and I hunted them basically on the weekends. And in Washington, you only get one deer, and we only get maybe 2 weekends to hunt. So it's not like back east where you can get 5 whitetail and however many you can get. So it was very limited. But I hunted with my grandpa because my dad was working lots of times, and so my grandpa would take me out with my brother, and in Western Washington it'd be downpouring, and I'd have boots that were 2 sizes too big, and I'd be wearing cotton jeans and a soaking wet sweatshirt. And so that's kind of how I started. And I hunted for years and years, and then I as I got older, my dad didn't have to work so much. We hunted more as a family, and then started getting into elk hunting in my mid 20s, and then my late 20s is when I first got into bear, and that's kind of been an obsession. And our bear season over here, we can get 2 bear a year, and it starts August 1st and ends November 15th, so we have a very liberal season. And that's one of the things that attracted me to bear hunting and archery hunting, actually, because archery, we have a long season for deer, but bear hunting allowed me to get out in the woods at an earlier time, and the weather was nicer, but it allowed me to get out and stretch my legs and be out in the woods much longer than if I just deer hunted or if I just elk hunted. But I hunt everything. I hunt elk, deer, cougar. I just don't hunt waterfowl. That just doesn't interest me at this point in time.
I always want to hunt waterfowl, mostly because I don't ever dedicate any time to it. So there's always another buck or something that I'm chasing that would, normally be our duck hunting season. So I tend to never actually duck hunt. If I get out, it's maybe once a year, and then it seems like that's enough for me.
And for reference, I should tell your listeners, I'm 46 now, so I've been hunting since I was 12, and so I've been around the block a few seasons. Not as many as some, but more than others.
Yeah. So was there always, even when you first started hunting, was there a bear season in Washington, or was that something that was added, throughout your hunting career?
So when I was younger, I never really paid any attention to it, but we had one, and back then you could actually bait and use hounds. So when I was 12, that was it'd be in the mid 80s. And yeah, you could use bait and hounds, but that we never participated in that. It just wasn't something that we did. It wasn't that we were against it as a family or anything. It's just not something that we ever pursued. And then when that got outlawed in the early 90s, that's when I stepped into bear hunting later in time, but not till after it was banned. But yeah, I know that we had a season. I just never paid any attention to it.
So was that that sow that you shot that had the ground shrinkage? Was that your first bear you shot then?
Yeah, she was a cinnamon bear, and she's on the wall behind me, actually. And to this date, she's one of my favorite hides. She's like a really light cinnamon, and then when you put your hand underneath the fur and kind of lift it up, there's like a real white kind of an underwool, thick, because it is a fall bear and it gets cold over in Eastern Washington. It has just a gorgeous hide on it. It's not the biggest bear, but yeah, the hide's just absolutely fantastic.
I always find it
It's a
so
really cool hide.
fascinating, the different color phases, and even a jet black bear, versus a bear that's just kind of, got a little bit of like a charcoal type fur. I mean, it's interesting to see so many different phases of the colors.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got a fall bear on the back of my man cave chair here, and I never realized how it has almost like a grizzly color to it. It's not like a chocolate. It's not a brown. It's almost like a real light chocolate gray. It's a really cool coloration. And I didn't even really notice it when I shot it. I noticed it when I got it back from the taxidermist. I thought, man, this is actually a really, really cool hide. And it's got kind of a skunk red streak down the back.
That's pretty cool.
So yeah, it's pretty neat.
So, okay, out of all the bear hunting seasons, do you guys still have a fall and a spring bear hunting season in Washington? I know
So we
that was in
did.
jeopardy, right?
Yeah, we had a spring season that lasted from like April till mid-April till mid-June. But that was it wasn't over the counter. It was a special draw that you had to put in for, and they only allocated like 600 tags, 660, and a success rates. The usual take would be about 140 bear, something like that. But that got canceled due to some political maneuvering. And we will see what happens with that. We still have a fall season, and that's over the counter. And like I say, that's from August till mid-November. So yeah.
Do you find that that's going to be in jeopardy anytime soon as well? I mean, is that
The fall
something?
season,
Yeah.
that wouldn't surprise me at all. I honestly think so. With our Fish and Wildlife Game Commission, there's 9 commissioners. They're appointed by the governor. Our governor happens to be kind of an environmental whack job, and not all those commissioners are that way. There's 4 or 5. There's 4 that are kind of pro hunting, and there's 1 that's kind of a swing vote, but the other 4 are obviously anti-hunting, anti-predator hunting for sure. And I really think it's their goal to get rid of the fall bear season. I think spring bear is just kind of a precursor to that. Because if they were so concerned about 160 bear being taken, well, in the fall we're taking a couple thousand, and obviously they're going to come back and be like, well, if they're concerned about 160, why wouldn't they be concerned about a couple thousand? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, I've been told by numerous people that like the Idaho-Washington border has more bears per capita than pretty much anywhere in the continental United States. Is that
We have we have plenty of bear. And oddly enough, like this year, judging from social media and just judging from my own going out, it's been a banner year for bear. Like they're everywhere. I've only gone out 4 times so far this year, but I'm 75% seeing bear. So 3 out of the 4 times I've seen bear. The last time I was out, I had 4 bear within 100 yards of me. One as close as 23 yards, 23 or 27, but very close. I was just using my bow. I've been trying to get one with a bow, but it's very thick, so everything's got to, the brush is very thick. Everything has to be perfect. But the bear are just dropping like flies. Like, it's not overly difficult to find a legal bear over here to tag out on.
So let's kind of talk about that a little bit then, like the logistics of like what's the terrain like in the state of Washington? And I know you said it's pretty thick, and depending on where you're at, if you're like coastal versus more inland, I mean, coastal seems like it's almost like a Jurassic Park type jungle going on.
Yeah, so Washington, I really love the state. I was born and raised here. I can't stand the politics here. That's a whole different conversation. But the state is very cool in that we have a lot to offer as far as terrain goes. We have coastal rainforests, we have high alpines, we have arid deserts, we have rolling prairie. We have a lot to offer. The west side of the state is very thick with blackberries that are 8-10 feet tall and impossible to walk through, but they have bear tunnels in them. We've got on the east side of the state, it's more arid. So there's like broken up pines and rocky canyons and stuff like that. Less rain. But over there they have more color phases, which is kind of cool. So we have color phases on the west side too, but they seem to have more blondes, more cinnamons on the east side. Yeah, there's just all sorts of different terrain. There's mountains and just low foothills. Pretty much anything you want over here as far as terrain goes.
Yeah. So what do you primarily hunt in then? In your home range or your range that you bear hunt the most?
So my neck of the woods, I'm in Western Washington. I'm only about 60 miles south of the Canadian border. And where I hunt, I'm kind of hunting lowland foothills, as I call them, just kind of rolling hills. They're still, I mean, they're mountains to probably a lot of Midwesterners. But it's clear cuts, it's mature tree stands, it's brushy, it's thick. I've had some people say, "Oh, this area is too thick to hunt." Not Washington, but whatever state they're in. Oh, it's too thick. You can't hunt bear. And I'm thinking, man, if you can hunt bear in Washington, you can hunt them just about anywhere. It can be real thick. But the point is you need to plan a strategy or an idea of how to hunt them. Yes, it's thick, but they make mistakes. They break out into the open. They feed on edges. You can find them in fresher clear cuts, power line cuts, that type of stuff. So it's very doable to hunt them even in this thick stuff.
Yeah. So that kind of reminds me of like the state of Wisconsin and the North Woods. And it's so gosh darn thick, just tall stands of pines and all kinds of trees like that. And it's so thick that you really can't see more than 20 yards in front of you. And I can't imagine those guys bear hunting without either hounds or baiting. I can't. And especially the fact that a lot of the tracts of land aren't as large as out west, so you really don't have the opportunity to explore as much and find a clear cut like that to where you can actually hunt it. I mean, I couldn't imagine trying to successfully hunt bears, in the Midwest and doing that without those tools or those aids. So I imagine it proves difficult other than the fact that you said, they make mistakes. You find them in clear cuts, crossing or whatever. Is that kind of primarily your approach to finding them or finding berries in an open area, or what do you zone in on?
I always zone in on the food source. But you gotta have a shooting lane. So that's the difficulty is in Western Washington being able to find a shooting lane. Obviously, I'm not shooting through brush. If I see movement, I'm not just shooting in the brush. I want a clear shot. I want a broadside shot. I've been working creek bottoms recently because the creeks go down in the summer and bears kind of use them as highways because it's easy walking. There's water. There's berries on the side. There's brush. There's cover. So I've been working those quite a bit. I like to walk down old decommissioned logging roads that are kind of grown over. Bears will travel along those too. They don't want to waste the calories, so if there's an easy walk, they'll take it, and they feed along those roads lots of times. Um, so in Western Washington, that's kind of my strategy. But well, wherever I go, I always want to follow the food. But in Western Washington, you really got to pay attention to shooting lanes and how are you going to make a shot. And that's where predator calling comes in as an advantage too. In more arid areas, it's not so bad. You can see several hundred yards lots of times in eastern Washington, spot them from a great distance and then go make a play. But yeah, I mean, all of my shots for bear are like 50 yards or less, pretty much. They're all very close. The bear I shot last year was like maybe 20 yards.
So, do you ever employ like a tree stand or anything like that, and just get some elevation and on maybe one of those old abandoned logging roads or something like that, to where you can be elevated above them and see a longer distance, and try and call them in?
So when I am elevated, I like to be kind of mobile when I'm bear hunting, or even if I'm deer hunting. I'm not a big tree stand guy, but in Washington and in a lot of the West, we have old growth stumps that are huge old stumps that were cut down, virgin timber, and you can climb up on those and get a look around. Or there's big stump piles from slash burn cuts, where they've clear cutted a big patch of land. They've piled up a bunch of logs. You can climb up on those and look over and through the brush lots of times. So if you're on the ground level, it might be over your head or difficult to see. But if you can get up 10, 12, 15 feet on a pile of those logs, you can see patches, you can see open areas, you can see things coming. So that's what I like to do. It's not that I don't have the patience to sit up in a tree, but I find myself definitely wanting to stretch my legs or whatever it may be. I'm
I
not
hear
much
you.
tree stand. Yeah.
I have a very, very hard time, especially here in the Midwest. Uh, People like to do all day sits during the rut so they can catch that deer making that mistake, cruising through midday or late afternoon. And I find it terrible, miserable to do that. And sometimes I actually have to get down and kind of stalk my way into a different area and reset up, just because I can't sit there all day in a tree stand. So I get that feeling. It's almost unbearable at some point, but I have to come up with little things to try and keep myself occupied and give myself rewards for every 20 minutes or half hour that I can make it.
Yeah, I don't think I could. I don't think I could hack it. I mean, even last year. I mean, I get it. Whitetail. You got to be. They're a whole different breed. Whitetail. But I got a whitetail last year. I wasn't in a tree stand. I was out hiking, and I got a 5x4. So that's a 9 point to you Easterners.
Yep.
He had a double eye guard on one side, and he was in the rut, and he was just grunting coming up this hill that I had spotted the day before, and I ended up just ambushing him. But I like that as a hunt too. Like I like being on the ground level. It's to me that's a challenge. Because they can smell, real well down there. You got to watch your wind. I don't happen to use cover scent. So yeah, I don't know. I like the challenge of being on the ground and close.
Yeah, I hear you for sure. So I have to ask you, do you ever try and find a specific bear and then come back and target that bear, or is it mostly just kind of luck of the draw on what you come across as you're hunting?
Most of the time, by the time I see a bear, it's close, and provided it's a male and no cubs and stuff, I'll pop it. There's this chocolate bear that I've seen a couple of times the last 4 years, and I saw him like 2 weeks ago in the same like 50-yard patch of brush. I'd say 100 yards patch. And he was one of the ones I was talking about earlier, that when I was surrounded by those four, he was one of them, and he ended up crossing the road about 100 yards from me, but I had my bow, and I squeaked at him with my mouth, and I was trying to call him over, and he just stopped. Nice broadside shot, and looked at me, and just kept on cruising to the next little cut, but he never came in. Um, so him and I have played cat and mouse a little bit, but other than that, um, it's pretty much luck of the draw for me.
Yeah. What would you recommend? Like, so obviously I've never hunted bears, and if I were to say come to the state of Washington to hunt bears, which is a journey, but what would you say would be like the most forgiving or easy terrain to try and hunt for a new bear hunter?
An easy hunt.
Well, not necessarily easy, but like terrain that would be, to where it's not like the most challenging bear hunt you could do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To where
Yeah.
you actually had maybe potential for success due to being able to sight a bear, spot one or something like that.
I would suggest a strategy of, and this can go Eastern Washington or Western Washington.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by overpriced wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I heard that for a limited time, all Mint Mobile wireless plans are $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they sell wireless service online. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. To get this new customer offer, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Walking those old decommissioned logging roads. So in Western Washington, we have these real tall blackberries, real brushy, and in right now and till about the end of September, they're in full swing, and the bears just hammer those things. In Eastern Washington, there's plenty of old logging roads and stuff too, but that's a little bit more open. But if you find an old logging road that kind of borders a creek, um, down in those creek bottoms, they have a thing called rose hips, which is like a round red berry. It's kind of thorny. And bears like to eat those. And so, I mean, that's a real simple strategy. It's just taking your gun or your weapon for a walk along those logging roads, and real slow, real quiet, watching the wind, and trying to catch one feeding. That's an easy hike lots of times and an easy strategy.
So, your recommendation for actually, trying to get a bear would pretty much just be slowly stalk through the food sources. Is there a way that you e-scout or anything like that you try and help yourself identify those ahead of time when you're going out, or is it kind of like a home turf advantage type thing?
I've used e-scouting. That's kind of how I got my 2009 spring bear. I stumbled into an area that had a lot of bear sign, and I went into this cut, and it was slightly overgrown. It was probably a 6 or 7 year old cut, so it was super thick. But I thought, well, I can't really see in here. I'm going to back out and see what I see on Google Earth back in 2009. So then I looked at Google Earth, and in this patch, I could see like little teeny pockets of openings, and then a real maybe like a 200-yard stretch, 150-yard stretch of a patch of green. And I thought, well, I never would have saw that unless I looked on Google Earth. So I went back there, and what had happened is bears throughout the years have stripped those trees and killed them, and they created these little teeny open pockets that were like 20 to 30 yards around. And then in the center, where that long stretch was, there was a wider area of several trees that had been killed, and so there's like a big grassy patch right there, and there was spring bear damage all over through there. And so I ended up taking a bear right in that little patch, which I affectionately call Paradise. And really, that's my most extent use for kind of e-scouting. I like having boots on the ground. I might kind of glance at an area maybe with my Onyx on my phone, and look at like a road and like an old logging road, and okay, that leads to that cut, or there's a swamp over here, or this or that. Um, and so it gives me an idea of kind of what's in the area or what's been in the area as far as cuts go and swamps and creeks. But I really just kind of like to explore physically and look and get to know what's going on. Um, so that's me.
Yeah. So when you do that and you've got your boots on the ground and you're looking and exploring, what are some of the things that you're taking mental note of and saying, okay, this looks like paradise to me. This looks
Oh,
like a place that holds bears more than any other place, or it looks like bear country.
well, scat is first and foremost. If you're finding like fresh bear scat, especially fresh bear scat, that's a good place to start. Um, I don't hunt bear in like super mature stands of trees, because the undergrowth of those trees, lots of times it's just ferns. There's not a lot of food in there. I like kind of younger to mid-range clear cuts, where the sun's been able to reach and we got a lot of brush growing and stuff like that. Um, you know, in Eastern Washington, and as well as Western or anywhere else you go, you'll find stumps that have been ripped apart and the bears tear into them to get to termites or ants, whatever it might be, bees. Um, there's very not so obvious clues of, for example, that chocolate bear. There's this road that borders that clear cut that I always see him in, and he has. In fact, there's a picture of it in one of my books. Um, he stands up and bends this alder tree over and snaps it over his shoulder, or at least a bear did, I should say. But they do that to kind of mark their territory. It's like a rubbing tree, and they'll snap it and bite that twig over. So then, even if I'm walking along and I see brush that looks like it's been beat by a stick, by a little kid, I'll stop and take a look, because bears, they thrash that brush when they eat it. And lots of times the brush will have thorns or a stick or something, and you can find little tufts of hair. So that might tell you, hey, that's a black bear, or maybe it's a color phase, or maybe it wasn't a bear at all. I always check muddy areas. Like if I'm walking along and I see like a puddle or something, I'll be looking for tracks. Very similar to deer hunting, but bear, they're a lone animal, and so they don't run in herds, so they're a bit of a challenge in that respect. But I always tell people, slow yourself down and pay attention to things around you. And nature will talk to you if you just take the time to listen.
Yeah. So when you mentioned like newer growth, you're talking like 10 years or younger type stands of timber, something that's been fairly recently clear cut and starting to grow back.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, over here when you clear cut, the first couple of years aren't so good because the brush is just kind of starting to come in. But when it's my height, 6 foot or so of tangled brush and rough openings and stuff like that, I like to hunt those. But I mean, even in Eastern Washington, the last couple of years, we've had some monster fires burn through our national forests. And you drive over there now, and you talk to some people and they think forest fires is like a nuclear bomb went off. But in reality, lots of these forest fires, they're excellent for habitat once they start coming back, for deer and elk and everything else. And there's brush that's coming in now, and I think in part that's partially to thank for a lot of these bears getting taken, is because the bear are rebounding with all this new food, and I think they're doing quite well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find that like hunting like edges of burns, or maybe like 2 or 3 year old burns where the stuff is really starting to come back and it's still young and tender, especially, well, not in the spring for you anymore, but like in the spring they like that grass, right? Like the real young, sweet, tender grass. I mean, is that something that that really helps? And I'm sure even in the fall it does too, as far as the edges of burns and that new, young, fresh, tender growth, or even like the transition in between old and then the burn?
Yeah, I definitely. So I talk about spring bear hunting in the book. Definitely in the spring, like for let's say Idaho, they have over-the-counter spring bear tags. You want to look for that fresh green up because that's the first food that's available. Is fresh green grass. And so if there's an old abandoned logging road cut, if there's an old burn or an edge that's getting more sun than another spot, a certain side of a hill, south-facing slopes, uh, you want to kind of focus on where that green's coming. And in the spring, it's almost like a neon green. Like that fresh green grass is just such a vibrant, beautiful green color that pops out. Bears really hit that. And then once it gets a little bit later in the spring, other things start to come in like skunk cabbage. Um, Over here, they strip Douglas fir trees and eat a cambium layer, so they'll be stripping this bark and they eat this a thin layer of wood underneath the bark that has kind of a sugary sap in it. Um, there's a bunch of different stuff that they eat in the spring, but definitely focus on that green grass at first.
Yeah.
And along with that too, like bear scat differs throughout the year. You might see bear scat in the spring, and it almost looks like horse flop. It looks like almost because a lot of it's grass, but it's not horse. Obviously, it has a different shape and stuff like that. But somebody might walk by and be like, "Oh, who knows what that is?" That grass is the spring bear scat. And then right now you find some spring bear scat and it looks like the inside of a berry pie. It's black with seeds and it just looks like pie filling almost. So it really varies. You just need to learn what the bear are eating in your territory for that time of year.
Yeah, so let's kind of go into that a little bit more if we could, as far as like the bear scat then. Like what because that would be a good indicator, say you're not necessarily in that range or that exact spot, but some reason the bears are like traversing through an area to get to another area, and you're seeing that scat. That could kind of like clue you in on where exactly to look, right? I mean, depending on how fresh it is.
No, absolutely. Like, I'm always looking for scat, and when I find it, I'll kick it or I'll stomp on it or something. So next time I come around, if it hasn't been stomped on, it means I A, haven't seen it, or B, it's fresh, or at least to me. I always tell people, hey, if you see like spring bear scat, and even if it's old, kind of mark that in your head because in the spring the bear are in that area and they're in there for some reason. And if you're hunting in the fall, they might very well be back in that area. The food source might return. So where I hunt bear in the spring, they're there quite a bit, and then I don't really think they happen to go anywhere. It's just that they start to eat different food sources come in, and they start to eat berries and more brush as more and more things become available. So really pay attention to the different types of scat that you find. And also, if you're having a hard time figuring out what they're eating, the scat will tell you. Like if you find a bunch of different seeds in there, try to figure out what those seeds are from. Lots of times there's cherry pits, there's all sorts of different seeds. So kind of dissect that, push on it, see what you see. I mean, I've even found like fawn deer hooves in bear scat.
Oh wow.
So it's interesting what scat will tell you.
So,
and that will help you focus too on hunting areas.
Yeah, definitely. So I have to ask you then, like, what do you typically see, throughout the fall bear season, early on versus later on? What's kind of some indicators that you see in the scat, or that those food sources are most likely going to be hit?
It depends where I'm hunting. In Western Washington, it's definitely right now it's like berries for sure because there's so many and there's no reason why they wouldn't be eating them. Now that the scat might vary depending on the berry that they're eating, but the blackberries are obvious. If I head up in the Alpine, there's blueberries that are going on, and so that scat's a little bit more purple. In Eastern Washington or along those creek bottoms and stuff, those rose hips, they have kind of a white seed to them. And the poop will be almost kind of a reddish color, and so that tells me that they're hitting those rose hips. It just depends what food's available for them in that area.
Right. So then, I don't know. I'm just kind of curious. Like, it seems like there's so much more like their scat can tell you. Um, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but like,
No,
yeah,
you're right. And there's an inside argument about, well, the bigger the poop, the bigger the bear, and like, to me, there's some uh validity to that. It stands to reason. A 500-pound man would probably crap bigger than a 100-pound man. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And so the diameter and the amount of a pile of scat, that can, in my opinion, correlate with the physical size of the animal. I might find a large pile, and then maybe on the same road or on the same trail a smaller pile. Maybe that's a sow and a cub. But if I find a nice big round pile, and it's been, you find them all over the place. Sometimes bears will kind of crap all around the same little area. You definitely want to stop and pay attention. You never know when that nice Bruin could show up, a nice boar.
yeah. Do you ever like find them? Like, I know they wander around, but like, is there certain spots where they'll try and sleep, or just kind of do they just keep roaming and wandering and then find a new spot to kind of rest and then move on?
So I haven't really figured out like specific bear bedding areas accurately, but like, you know what I mean. But there's obviously areas that are cooler than some areas, and bears, especially this time of year, they're trying to stay cool because it's hot out and they have a black sweater on. So shaded areas down by creeks, maybe close to a wallow, I pay attention to those. There's some cool footage up in Alaska, and I haven't seen it a lot over here. Maybe it's because it's too thick, but in California too, like Black Bear Pursuit, he's on Instagram, and he's got some really good footage of like bear stomp trails, where over years and years and years and years, bear their footprints hit the same spot in the trail over and over and over, and you can see where they're walking. And this isn't just one bear. This is like, you know, generations of bears make these stomp trails, and that's a really cool thing to check out. I mean, you'll probably see it in California more than you would here, at least in Western Washington. But we have like bear trails like through blackberry bushes. People don't notice that, but if you and it's not super huge, but it's big enough for them to walk through, and it's just like tunnels. It's just bear tunnels through these things.
Have you ever
Um,
got down on your hands and knees and tried to go through one of those bear tunnels?
oh yeah, definitely. So I always bring like leather gloves with me because the black bears will just tear you apart. But I've had to go after wounded or dead bear in the brush like that, because when you shoot a bear, they head for like the thickest cover. If they don't drop instantly, they're heading for like nasty thick defensive cover. So
Yeah.
that's where they bolt for, and then that's where you have to go. So I even bring like pruning shears, hand clippers for gardening along with me to help blaze a trail through that stuff. Lots of times it's handy that way, but it's definitely a gut check. If you're crawling through blackberry briars, just big enough to fit through, and you're looking for possibly a wounded bear that can put you on edge.
So, what's the longest you've ever had to crawl through one of those bear tunnels like that?
um let's see. My brother, he shot a bear years ago right at dusk, but he had to work the next morning. So what happened was he shot it. He thought he killed it. He went to get me, and then at dark 30 in the morning, we hiked up to where he shot, and he's like, "Yeah, I think it's right down here. Here's where I hit it from." And now I'm gonna go to work. So he went to work, and then so I start tracking this. I found the blood trail on this nasty clear cut, and I had to go. Oh, I don't know. I had to go probably 90 yards down the hill, but it was like super thick. And by the time I found his bear, if it wasn't dead, it would have had me, because it was only like maybe 10 feet away that I finally spotted it.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I was able to process it and get it up to the road. And then he came back that evening after work and tagged it and everything else. But yeah, it was like pretty brutal. And it was 90 plus degrees that day, and the mosquitoes were tearing me apart. And I ran out of water. It was quite the cluster.
Do you
But
ever find that like or worry about the meat spoiling by the time you get to them, or is that kind of not really a problem?
no, I definitely worry about it, especially in this heat. Bears seem to turn pretty quick because they're, black absorbs heat. So if they're out in the sun, they are just absorbing that heat. Their fat seems to sour quicker than other types of fat, in my opinion. So to me, it's imperative to find that bear, process it, and get it cool and dry as quickly as possible. I like to hunt in August. I do it on occasion, but I never really start seriously going after bear until kind of the beginning of September. Um, it gets a little bit cooler. I don't have to worry about it so much. And that's something I encourage like new bear hunters too. I'm like, hey, if you are a new bear hunter and you've never done something before, you're going to be a little bit slower at skinning and processing. So don't go, 5, 6, 7, 8 miles back and shoot something and then not know what to do with it. Or, if you're mid 40s, almost 50 and not in the best of shape, it might not be a good idea to shoot one 10 miles back. It might take you a while. The meat might spoil.
Yeah.
So, find something a little more to your skill level. Now I'm sure a 20-year-old won't have a problem with it, but bears spoil quick. So all depending on the temperature, you want to get them cooled and dried as quickly as possible.
So that kind of falls into the expectations versus harsh realities realm of knowing your limitations on.
Yeah, I'm not the type of guy, even with deer, I'm not the type of guy to put the entire deer in my backpack or the entire bear in my backpack. I would rather take a couple of trips just so I don't tweak an ankle or tear an ACL or, something like that.
Yeah.
I'd rather walk twice as far than carry twice the weight. So I break it up. And I hunt kind of within my limits. Like and I'm not telling people to take the easy route out. I'm just saying, like, for the benefit of the animal, you deserve it. The animal deserves it. To have your best effort, but also be realistic about it and to get it out in time.
Yeah.
So, like the bear I killed last year, he was only a mile and a half from my truck. But I got him out. It just took a little bit of time.
What's the average weight of like bears out in Washington as far as,
I would say
size?
like your average bear out here is probably 180 to 200 pounds. But they get bigger. If you find a 300-pound bear out here, that's a nice bear. Now, every bear on the internet's 300 pounds. I don't know if you noticed that. At least.
Yeah.
But I don't think they all are. So, I would say, like an average 200-pounder bear. They get some bigger ones. But yeah, that's about the size.
Yeah, which wouldn't be terrible to make 2 trips then,
No.
Yeah.
No.
That's not
I mean,
bad.
those hides get heavy, believe it or not.
Yeah, that's true. Like on a deer, you're not really, I mean, unless you're got a real nice trophy or something, you're not actually packing out that hide unless you want to do something with it,
Yeah.
So when I quarter them up and carry them out, normally I carry out the whole deer, but I'll just take, the skull with me or whatever, and the rest of it stays. So that way I
Yep.
can lighten the load, and I do tend to take it all out with me though. One trip.
I
I'm one of those that I'm a little bit opposite, but maybe it's just because I'm a little stubborn, a little bit younger still. But I tend to hate to make a second trip if I don't have to.
I think part of my problem is I backpack in a lot, and then I'm like, well, I've got camp and I've got this deer, so I'll take like camp and then a hind quarter and a shoulder and a back strap, and then come back for the rest type of thing.
Yeah. Oh, I totally
Although,
get it. Yeah.
last year I got lucky. I had my 18-year-old. Well, not the last year, but the year before, I had my 16-year-old son at the time, so he had to carry a lot of it too, which was perfect.
Nice. No, that's awesome. Is there anything else that would kind of be a really big piece of advice, or what's the biggest piece of advice you'd give somebody if they were bear hunting as a beginner?
Have perseverance and patience. And when I say that, I mean, you want patience in your shot. So some states it's not illegal to shoot a sow with cubs. It's frowned upon, like in this state. Currently, it's not illegal, but in Alaska, it is. So that's the good thing about hound hunting and baiting is that you have lots of time to make sure that you're not shooting a sow with cubs. And it's important that we don't shoot sows with cubs because we want the species to flourish. And I don't know of an ethical hunter who would do such a thing, especially on purpose. So patience with that, patience with tracking. Bear do not bleed necessarily like a deer or an elk. They have fat and long hair, and that plugs up entry and exit wounds. It's very common to hit a bear and to have a decent blood trail for a short time, and it'll peter out pretty quick. Not every time, but lots of times. I've ran into that on several occasions. So have patience in tracking. Don't just look for blood. Don't just think if the blood ran out that the bear's fine. Bear will, when they're hit, they will hide like a tick under a log or rocks, wherever they can get to hide from you. And it's very easy to walk by them because they ball up. They don't have a big rack keeping them up and that you can spot. They're dark. They ball up kind of small. Think how big you are and think how big you can ball up and hide in a house or something. They do that. So have patience with that. Take the time and learn how to track. You want to look for busted branches and overturned leaves and all sorts of stuff. My 2009 bear, I didn't find him until the next day. I hit him kind of back. I hit him in the stomach, unfortunately. He ran almost a quarter mile, I think, from where I shot him. But the only reason I found him me and my brother went back the next day to search, and I was about giving up. And I said, well, I'm just going to walk the spur road and see what happens. And I was walking that spur road, and I looked off to the right, and I found a bear footprint in the mud that led across the road. So I followed it across the road into this swamp, and there he was laying down. So have patience with that and perseverance with that. You got to take your time and be mentally tough. Not give up.
No, I think that's great advice. Douglas, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge. And it's always interesting to hear people talk about new things that I haven't done or want to learn more about and be able to share that with people. So that's always wonderful when you can share that knowledge with not only just me, but everybody else that's listening. And where can people find you if they want more information or find your books or get in touch with you personally? Where can they do all of that?
I've got 2 social accounts. I'm on Facebook. My name's just Douglas Boze, Boze. I'm on Instagram, Boze and Bears, my last name, Boze and Bears. They can find my books on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Some Cabela's carries them in stores. You can find that Ultimate Predator Calls app, which is like recordings of me predator calling. There's like 14 sets, and you can push that from your phone to a Bluetooth speaker, so you can have an e-caller for $5 instead of spending a couple hundred, which is a nice little app, I think. In fact, just this week I've had people call in cougar and wolves and bear all just this week with that app. So if it's legal in your state, I would encourage you to check that out if you're curious about predator calling. But yeah, feel free to hit me up on any of those. I'm happy to chat bear if people are having a hard time. I'll give them what tips I know and hopefully point them in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge.
Not a problem. Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Publicly Challenged podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please subscribe on whatever platform it is you're listening to. Also, if you could leave a review, that would help us out. And you can check us out on Instagram or at publiclychallenged.com. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the show.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by overpriced wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I heard that for a limited time, all Mint Mobile wireless plans are $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they sell wireless service online. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. To get this new customer offer, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.